So thank you very much, great Africans, and welcome to this hour of the day. It is a pleasure to meet you here. It has been long since we have had time to have some solemn conversations regarding the present state of African affairs and many things that proceed to unfold in Africa. So it is a pleasure indeed. And so I'll be very tasked in my presentation, if you may use that, because we all know that we, as the Change for African campaign, we are on the course of seeing what is that specific things that we as Africa, we are the indigenous Africans, we are the people who are responsible, who are domiciled in the continent of Africa. What is this that we can be able to do in one or the other to have a great Africa, because we know that being an African, it means that Africa is a business. And so we have so many things. I'll be very general. We have many things that are happening all the way from the south to the north of Africa, from the east to the west of Africa. Everything is taking shape in one or the other. We have something that continue to escalate. We have things that are, when it comes to even the wars that keep on taking place in Africa. It's in Sudan. Many things are still happening over there. We have the football game that are going on, being co-hosted by three countries in Africa. Those are all proceedings taking place in Africa. But then you see, when it comes to these general affairs of the African state of things, as I've said, that many of these things are defined they are defined by the political landscape in Africa. Because as we say that politics, many people tend to take politics as a game. Politics is not a game, but in the real self, politics is an organization of people. It's an organization of people's affairs. So this is something that if we as an African continent that are very sure and are very concerned about having a great Africa in terms of having at least a revolution as Africa, then there is one thing we need to do. There is now we need to break ourselves from the act that politics is something related to, it is a game. It is not a game. This is an organization of people's affairs. So how politics are run in our country, how politics are run in our continent of Africa, then it will shape how Africa is going to style up. So this is a very serious thing that it should be of concern when it comes to having a changed Africa. That is why we, as the Change for African campaign, speaking about our first pillar, which is governance. We have said that governance is also of development. And so that being our first pillar, then it shows that many of the things, because remember politics are run by politicians, and also governance systems are also headed by people. Now these are politicians, even from different sectors, not only those in the political space, but politics is always the most important things here, because many of the citizens across the African continent have vested their resources, have vested their taxes, have vested mandates to very critical mandates to the political figures in their countries across the African continent. So it shows that people give their money, people give what's supposed to give so as to build a nation. So people get very disheartened when what they gave their political leaders, they are not able to utilize that so as to have a good society. That is what I'm saying. For us to have a coherent society, because remember, building a coherent society, then it shows we first have to get that cohesion, having the cohesion that these people see that we have the unity in them, then they have one purpose. Remember I said that once we realize we are facing a particular problem, then develop the same intention towards curbing that particular problem. So what I was saying before we came to all that, but we have in Africa currently, we have things that are happening in both directions, both negative and positive, to the extreme end, and also those that have so much concern. That we have one way that things are happening, at least we may say things are happening great. We have the other way that things are not happening great. So what are we supposed to do to have a neutral state whereby at least we have an average kind of a population in Africa, whereby not people, like I saw the other day some data was just given out about when it comes to the wealth status in Africa, that a couple of billionaires in Africa, they have wealth that is more than half of the population of Africa. There's very few people, they have. So as the Change for Africa campaign, we are looking at something that we can have a style in which, even if you have so much people that being billionaires and even being so wealthy, it is not bad. But then a society that we have people who are very down, people who live in very states of destitute, very poor states, while we have other class that is very rich, So we're looking at having a society whereby we have at least, a ground that everybody can feel that, yes, I am in a continent that we have a lot of resources, and this is a continent of greater potential. So that is all about Africa. Many things are happening, and what we are doing currently at the Change for Africa campaign is we need to have a theoretical part of things whereby we are designing a very extensive document or a state of things, like we're designing something that will be aligning many of these things, because remember, during our 100 daily episode of the Change for African campaign, we had the 100 episodes, and then we used some very key global aspirations, global goals, African aspirations that have been there before. We used those goals to be able to define, or to be able to relate them to the 5 fundamentals of the Change for African campaign. These are the basics of a new Africa, the 5 fundamentals of the Change for African campaign: governance, potential, resources, living standards, and the climate change that we face as an African continent. These are the fundamentals of a new Africa, if you really want to have a great Africa. And so what we're doing is to design something that this is the path we're taking, so that we can have a clear map of what we're doing. So we have the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We are taking those goals, we try to analyze them very shortly and relate them to the basics of the Change for African campaign with the other many factors. We are taking the aspirations of the Africa Agenda 2063, the African Continental Free Trade Area. We are taking even the roles of the AUC, the African Union Commission. We also take and make sure that these are things that are going to guide us, because we are not going to formulate new things. Things have been there in the past summit that have been the African leaders have attended. Things have been there, so it is not our duty to go back and design many more things. But we are going to make sure what is there. It has been there before, but the problem is the implementation part of it. That is why governance is the first pillar, because people who implement are people in the governance systems. If you can use that, people in the governance system. So we have to make sure that we have a governance system in Africa, and a governance system in Africa that understands that there is a problem when it comes to implementation. Why is it that there is a problem when it comes to implementing some of these aspirations that have been there before? We identify that and then define what really is the problem. Like the United Nations Sustainable Goal number 1, no poverty. What is poverty? Let's just try and see which are these channels you can use to be able to at least eradicate poverty in all its forms, starting from Africa. Remember, we are Africans, and Africa is our business, so we start to deal with Africa. Allow me to end at that particular point. It has been some point time having you, and as we proceed to even watch the African games, the CHAN games, continuing in the Eastern Africa, part of Africa. Let us continue to support our different teams in Africa. Remember, these are all African teams, and these are our boys trying to showcase their talents. And as I said, the sports industry, what these guys are doing, what these young men are doing, this is an industry that has a great potential, even being part of job opportunities for young people, because it is an industry that the young people can be able to engage in, and if we are able to invest in that industry, then we are going to also curb the problem of unemployment in Africa. Because remember, we still have a very huge population in Africa that is yet to be unemployed, and many more things still facing Africa that are calling for us to be decisive when it comes to seeing what are the things we want to do to have a great Africa. Thank you very much, fellow Africans, and have some great time. And we are Africans, and Africa is our business. So let us meet then as we proceed to see what are these practical things we can be able to do for Africa. Change for African campaign is still live and well. Thank you, and have some great time. Very good. Thank you.